Welcome to this explainer. Today we're putting on our lead enterprise architect hats and diving deep into the absolute most critical layer of a hospital information system, its data architecture. We are moving way beyond just looking at servers and applications to answer the fundamental question of how we actually store, manage, secure, and scale the massive amounts of data that an entire hospital depends on. Listen, we aren't just managing shopping carts here. We're managing life-saving information where every single millisecond counts and accuracy is absolutely non-negotiable.
To really understand why this matters, I want you to picture a scenario. It's 2 a.m. On the surface, the hospital infrastructure looks perfectly fine. The APIs, totally healthy. Your Kubernetes clusters, scaling beautifully. The network is completely green. But suddenly, doctors can't open patient records. Appointments start timing out left and right. Billing transactions are completely stalled out. And critical reports that usually take seconds are taking agonizing hours to load.
So everyone in the IT department is panicking, asking exactly this question: what on earth just happened? Well, the investigation reveals a really hard truth. The application wasn't the problem at all. The problem was the data architecture. A system is literally only as strong as its data layer. In fact, a staggering number of massive hospital IT outages aren't caused by sophisticated cyber attacks. They're caused by misconfigured, overgrown databases that just finally collapse under their own weight. When you don't design for data growth, consistency, and recovery right from the start, the whole hospital grinds to a halt.
Okay, let's take a look at our blueprint. We're going to cover core entities and relationships, ownership and transactions, workloads and storage strategies, scaling and security, lifecycle and recovery, and finally, making architectural trade-offs.
Starting off with Section 1, Core Entities and Relationships.
Before we even think about picking a database engine or looking at a cloud provider, we gotta start by understanding exactly what data actually exists in our system. And these aren't just isolated technical terms or simple database tables, right? These entities represent the interconnected operational reality of the entire hospital. A patient is connected to an appointment, which is connected to a doctor, which generates a medical record and a billing record. We map these out using classic relational database concepts like primary and foreign keys, because this interconnected nature is exactly what prevents dangerous data silos. Think about it. If cardiology and neurology are operating on completely disconnected sets of patient data, the risk of medical errors absolutely skyrockets. Mapping these core relationships ensures the system maintains perfect consistency across every single department.
Moving right along to Section 2, Ownership and Transactions.
Once we know what the data is, we have to ask one of the most critical architectural questions in enterprise design. Who actually owns this data? We really have to weigh our options here carefully. On one hand, we've got a shared database architecture. This gives us great operational simplicity, but it creates strong coupling, which means if the database goes down, the whole operation goes down. On the other hand, we have a database per service architecture. Now, this gives our microservices independent scaling and autonomy, but wow, does it introduce massive operational complexity. Just imagine the headache of trying to generate a simple hospital-wide daily report when you have to fetch and join data across 50 independent microservice databases. It turns a basic query into an absolute distributed systems nightmare.
To see why this ownership matters so much in practice, let's look at a realistic appointment booking process. The system has to verify the patient, check the doctor's calendar, create the appointment, update the availability, and maybe process a copay. So the crucial question is, what happens if Step 4 fails? The real-world chaos is immediate. The patient shows up for their time slot thinking they have an appointment, but the doctor's actually in surgery because their calendar never actually synced. The hospital's data is now completely out of sync with reality, and that leads to incredibly frustrating experiences for both patients and the hospital staff.
To prevent those kinds of partial failures in critical hospital flows, we lean heavily on ACID properties: atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. This just ensures that a transaction either fully completes or it completely rolls back, nothing in between. In a shared database, this is pretty straightforward. But hey, if we chose that database per service route we talked about earlier, we'd have to implement saga patterns. That's a sequence of local transactions where each step updates data and triggers the very next step, all just to guarantee our data remains perfectly consistent across those independent services. So as you can see, it's a massive architectural trade-off.
Which brings us to Section 3, Workloads and Storage Strategies.
And here is the architect's golden rule. You must choose your storage technology based on the specific workload, not because the technology happens to be popular or trendy. This is exactly why the one giant database for everything approach is a massive mistake. Transactional patient data, that thrives in a relational database using OLT, online transaction processing, which is specifically designed for capturing thousands of really fast, small updates. But massive, static medical images, those belong in object storage. High-speed caching might use an in-memory database like Redis, while hospital-wide analytics need a data warehouse built for OLAP, online analytical processing, to handle complex queries across massive historical datasets.
This really highlights a fundamental divide in our architecture: operational versus analytical workloads. Just think about it. A doctor retrieving a single lab result to treat a patient right in front of them is an operational workload. It needs to be lightning fast. Meanwhile, a hospital executive analyzing 5 years of patient trends to forecast budget needs, that's an analytical workload. These are fundamentally different tasks, and they should absolutely never compete for the same database resources. Because if they do, resource starvation kicks in. That executive's massive analytical query might lock up the database, causing exactly the kind of 2 a.m. application crashes and timeouts we talked about at the very beginning of this explainer.
Let's pivot now to Section 4, Scaling and Security. So now we got to address the non-functional realities of our system, specifically handling massive user growth. What actually happens to your database when usage grows from 500 users to 5,000 and then all the way to 50,000? That's a 100x increase in load. Let me tell you, simply buying more CPU and memory won't save you. You will eventually hit a physical wall. This is why we absolutely must design for scalability from day one. We use techniques like read replicas, which let thousands of doctors view patient records simultaneously on secondary servers without slowing down the primary database where all the new data is actively being written. Throw in some careful indexing and connection pooling, and we can distribute massive load across the system without even breaking a sweat.
But look, as we scale, we're managing incredibly sensitive healthcare data, which means security literally cannot be an afterthought. Did you know the average cost of a healthcare data breach now regularly tops $10 million? And that's not even counting the massive regulatory fines. The stakes are just insanely high. Because a billing employee processing a claim shouldn't automatically have access to a patient's deeply personal clinical notes, our security and authorization have to be strictly aligned with actual business responsibilities. We enforce this through encryption, role-based access control, the principle of least privilege, and immutable audit trails, so we always know exactly who looked at what data and exactly when they looked at it.
Next up is Section 5, Lifecycle and Recovery.
We also have to design what happens to data after it's actually created. Healthcare systems generate an absolute mountain of historical information every single day. If we just let this grow forever, performance will tank and storage costs will skyrocket. So we absolutely must have a data lifecycle policy. But it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. For example, massive high-resolution MRI scans that take up really expensive high-performance storage, we might move those to cheaper, cold storage archives after just a few months. Meanwhile, lightweight text logs of a patient's vitals might remain active much longer. The data journeys from active usage to being archived in cheaper storage to eventual secure deletion after, say, 7 years to meet legal compliance. Basically, we actively manage the data instead of just letting our databases grow into a black hole.
And maybe even more importantly, how do we protect data from vanishing entirely when a disaster strikes? Keep in mind, high availability is not the same thing as data protection. If a database gets completely corrupted at 2 a.m., can the hospital physically afford to lose the last hour of patient vitals? The answer to that dictates your recovery point objective, or RPO, which tells us exactly how much data the hospital can afford to lose. Meanwhile, your recovery time objective, your RTO, tells us how quickly those systems must be fully operational again. These two metrics are the absolute foundation. They determine exactly what our automated backups, our replication, and our disaster recovery strategies need to look like.
Finally, let's jump into Section 6, Making Architectural Trade-offs.
As we wrap up this session, we really have to confront the ultimate truth of enterprise data architecture. There is rarely a universally perfect architecture. Every single decision is a careful balancing act. Do we prioritize the strong consistency of a centralized system, or do we want the agility of microservices? Do we pay a massive premium for peak performance, or do we optimize for cost? Take the choice between managed versus self-managed databases, for instance. Sure, you might save some money up front on infrastructure by running the database on your own servers, but you're going to spend a massive amount of costly engineering hours on patching, running backups, and general maintenance. Our responsibility as architects is to make the right trade-offs that reliably serve the hospital's specific business requirements today, while still leaving enough room to evolve tomorrow.
Ultimately, the best database architecture isn't the one with the flashiest, most advanced technology. It's the one that protects patients and empowers hospital staff to do their jobs effectively.
So I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to help you analyze your own systems. Does your database serve the technology or the business? Really think on that. I hope you'll join our next explainer, where we take this foundation and tackle API design and integration architecture. See you then.